Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the HeartStream Musings podcast. I am so excited to have a dear sister on the podcast this time, and her name is Erika Lim. Say hi.
Hi.
So Erika is an occupational therapist and death doula. So while she finds end of life a ripe time for unearthing love, meaning, and peace, she is most fascinated in the rich learnings of the life and death cycles that happen in our everyday life. She believes that if we can approach death with a bit more curiosity and acceptance, it can reveal truths about how we want to live. And that is just so beautiful. And I'm so excited to connect with you because, funny story, Erica and I knew each other from many, many moons ago when we were babies living in New York in our early 20s. And now here we are. She is embarking in this path of being a death doula. I'm a coach. And so it just feels so good to reconnect with you after many lifetimes. It seems like we're like different people, but we're still the same. I still remember trying to meet you to go see the Christmas tree at Rockefeller, and we ended up not going. So we just went to the East Village. I think we got Chipotle and then we went to the East Village. I don't know if you remember that memory.
We were such itty bitties for sure. It was like giant eyes. I remember that about us. Like we like met each other. We really liked each other. And then our eyes were just like, let's play in the city.
Oh my gosh. But I am just so curious. I didn't have any direct experience with anyone who was a death doula. I haven't experienced death that was very, very close to me. It's always been like second, third, interactions. But I would just love to hear, how do you even describe what you do now, being a death doula? What does that mean?
Yeah. So I like to say, as a death doula, and in the work that I've experienced, it's really, my job is to help soften and round out some of the hard edges that death and dying can bring to people and their families. And, that time period is so, you never know what's going to come up, right? It might be issues with the healthcare system, or it could be, someone you love's health just turning, and a lot of the emotions and feelings that come up with that, a lot of really emotional decisions that maybe need to be made. Maybe it's like family dynamics that come into play of like what should happen, what shouldn't happen, how to best take care of loved ones. And so there's a lot of strife. There's oftentimes a lot of unpredictable hardness that comes. And so death doula's work is to really come into a space and try to soften it and try to bring in a little bit more sacredness around what's happening, a little bit more unity around the family and the tribe that surrounds the person. It is the non-medical companion to this transition. So while we work with hospice, and I am a huge supporter of hospice and hospice care, I think it's a really beautiful, heart-centered institution. And so we coordinate with hospice. We make sure that, the space that everyone's walking into, everyone knows what the space is going to be, right? So that whether that is family, whether that is the healthcare team, we establish the values of who this person is, how they want this experience to be, and then we disseminate that information, whether that's in really building the physical environment around this person, whether that is in calming the family dynamics so that this person can really release into the sacred experience of dying and going. Or whether that is the healthcare team coming in to support and really giving them kind of instruction around this space is going to be soft and we want you to tread lightly coming in and care for this person with these values. So it's work that is not easily definable, but it has like an essence around it, right? If you can kind of hear it in my voice, the essence is really creating meaning and peace in this very sacred time for people and their families.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And work that's just so needed in this life, and holding space and creating a space that is sacred for all different parties, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and so how did you get into this line of work? How was it even shown to you that this is a path that you wanted to go on?
Yeah. So I'm licensed as an occupational therapist, and I was working in home health for a long time, for about a year actually, before the pandemic hit. And once the pandemic hit, it felt very irresponsible to keep moving from home to home to home. And so I actually took a break and stopped working. And it opened up a lot of opportunity to start thinking about what other setting I could work in. And hospice always called me. This time of end of life really kind of always struck me. Just like, when you feel something inside of you, it just sparks. And so thankfully, actually, the pandemic allowed me a lot of space to start researching like OTs and hospice and what kind of work that looks like. And unfortunately, there's just not a lot of space for OTs in hospice based on Medicare rules and budgets. And so while I was on that exploration, an OT, a friend of mine, wonderful woman, was like, hey, I heard about this death doula that was on a podcast and it looks dope. Like, you should check it out. And that's really like, and then I just became like a voracious Googler into everything death doula and ate it all up. I loved that. I loved that a doula's values are around really quality care, not having really strong time limits or limited number of visits. It was like really all encompassing and holistic when it comes to caring for people and their families. Whether it's as simple as like making tea for everyone just to set the mood, or whether it's really mediating conversations, right? And so I liked that it had social, emotional, spiritual, psychological, practical, all the kind of holistic pieces all within it. And it just showed me like, oh, this is the care that I actually want to give. I want to give quality care where there isn't such strong lines. And because I felt like working in the healthcare industry, everyth's so siloed. Your responsibilities are within this box and you can't go outside of it, And so I needed a system or a platform that felt freer, and to offer my heart in its size in what it wants to give.
Yeah. And so when you were researching and your friend told you like, hey, I heard about this stuff on this podcast, and you were just researching, like what struck a chord with you of, oh my gosh, this is meant for me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was that quality of care. It was that there are no lines to this care, right? Like I could talk to, like I could go into a family space and talk to the 11-year-old about death and dying if that's important to them, right? I can talk to, I can be free to really work through any fears with like aunties or uncles, and then translate what's happening to like their kids around what they're trying to express. Like, I think that flexibility and fluidity where I could just serve according to the need. And that's as simple as that. Like, that is what drew me. And because at end of life, so many things come up, I liked that nothing was going to be the same, right? Nothing, it's not a structured, like, this is how you doula. It's like, it's fluid, and I get to listen to problems and figure out how to problem solve and soften space. And I like the fluidity of, and the freedom of the practice. And I think also what I liked is that it felt like a really old role, right? It felt like a role that's always existed in our cultures. Someone that's just sort of there to really kind of fill in the spaces, offer more space, not be like, have a very specific rigid role, but can like observe and see what's needed and then do so, right? I think, and yeah, as I'm like talking, oh, there's more things. And in talking about like this like old role, or this role in our culture, I think I like that it's bringing back this communal aspect and this human aspect around death, right? Death not being a medical event, death being a very human event. It happens to all of us. It's a universal event. How do we make this, how do we accept the most natural part of this life, right? How do we accept and be in community and hold each other as whatever comes up for each of us, and be with, and not push away, not turn away, but yeah, move towards and hold each other and be a container and be a safe space. And I think that, you know, it's only recently that people have really started to die in hospitals. People used to die at home with their families, in community, in places that are familiar. And that tradition has only changed recently. And, you know, if you really talk to people, no one wants to die in a hospital. Right?
No.
Familiar. It's cold. There might be a TV on at all times. There might be, you know, you might have someone with you, like in your room, and it's not sacred, right? Or it doesn't feel close to what the soul wants as it's moving on, as it's passing. So
right. And so when you work with different people, where do you see it ending in a way? Because, and you can walk me through the process of, you know, they contact you and you help and you're there either, you know, before they pass, but then what is that transition of after it happens? What's the support there?
after death?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it depends on the family and what they want, of course, right? Everyone is very different. And comfort level around death will dictate a lot around what after death care would look like. I do like to encourage families, if they're open to it, if they're comfortable, to be able to really kind of spend time with their loved one that has just passed. And a lot of times I'll do that through a washing ritual. So it's like one last way we can take care of this person that we love. And we'll, you know, I'll say words, prayers, depending on what their religious affiliation is, but really kind of uniting words to understand and be present in what had just happened. And then whoever's comfortable in being there, really leading people through this washing ritual, where we do kind of observe every part of the body as we're like washing and cleaning it. And in doing that and touching the body, you get to start to feel the change in temperature. You get to start to feel the change in tautness of the skin. You get to start to feel the stiffness that starts to come. And so in being able to feel, but also doing this kind of nurturing and loving ritual, you're starting to accept change, right? You're accepting impermanence. You're accepting, you're seeing for yourself, experiencing for yourself what it is to what it is for death to happen. Yeah, it's not just the moment that someone stops breathing. It's like the body's still on its way as well. And so it's a kind of a gift at that point to be able to feel that change while your family member's still there. And yeah, really taking it slow, because a lot of times we don't know what to do. And so it's like death will happen. And then it's like, let's call the funeral home, I guess, and tell everyone that this has happened. And
Yeah.
there's an anxiety that comes with death because no one knows what to do next. And so by coming back into ritual and taking space to slow everything down, it allows people to be a little bit more present with what they're feeling, and then also be present in being able to really feel change and feel
Yeah.
death happen, and what does an ending feel like. And if families are open to it, I also am trained to do a home funeral. So if we want to keep our family member there for 1, 2, 3 days, I can help really prepare ceremony around that as well. So preparing the body on dry ice, laying that person in honor, and then really making it a communal event. So loved ones can come, sit, be with, and really taking it slow. And that tradition, yeah, it's like people have, so many cultures have that wake, right? They have that time after someone dies to really slow everything down and be present with what's happening, and also be in community together as we're feeling whatever's coming up. And it's a time for sharing stories. It's a time for holding hands, holding each other, explaining to children what just happened, for people to start questioning their own mortality and really holding each other in that. So there's a lot of after death ritual and ceremony that can happen that I think no one is really coming back into practice, because people are holding a little bit more space for death and how it affects people. And it's kind of beautiful in these home funerals because, on day one, we're still calling the person that passed like mom, auntie, uncle, grandpa.
Right.
Day 3, people are starting to call it the body, right? The identity has shifted because people have really felt the changes that are happening. So it's kind of fascinating in that way.
Wow. And such a beautiful offering too, because like you said, there can be a little bit anxiety of the process of the unknown, and like such a journey to be able to walk someone through that process of the preparation, and then after death, what happens, and then just all of the planning aspect to it. But it's almost allowing them, like you said, to be present when that stuff is taken care of, and being able to hold this container so people can slow down and process how does it actually affect them. Because I've seen it often with family members of, it's like, okay, I have to plan this, I have to plan that. Wait, what color, and that's confusing at a time, especially if it's, a parent that passed away, and you have those feelings of grief. And so it's almost like you have to compartmentalize those things in order to get everything done.
Yeah. And then, that grief doesn't really go anywhere. And it's very easy to distract after that, right? And then it comes and hits in waves, or it comes and hits. And not to say that there's a way to prevent that or prevent grief at all, but it does allow space for grief to be there and really be present right away, right? And a comfort, that a communal space where people can do it together. Right? Really hold each other.
And so as you're talking more and more about just what does it feel like? What does it look like? What do people experience? I'm very curious as to, I essentially see you as like a healer, a holder, all of those things. And so what kind of internal work do you actually do for preparing to hold space for such a sacred, you know, milestone in someone's life, a chapter of being able to work with the energies of death and rebirth? What are your own spiritual practices?
Mm. The I would say the two most important things for me is surrounding myself with like really loving, wise friends.
Mhm.
Really loving, wise friends that can really offer perspective, right? To offer when things do get difficult, I do have like friends that can kind of piece around, this is your stuff and this is their stuff, right? Like really kind of separate the two if I'm not able to right away, and if I am holding a lot. So I'm really grateful for that. And then the other is meditation. Yeah. Um, I A lot of my training has been with it, like Vipassana, Goenka tradition of really feeling the body's sensations and being able to let go and really focusing on impermanence. And so um, that that practice, but also kind of sitting in awareness helps a lot, because it's like you really get to feel what's there.
Mhm.
And you can let it pass and move. And so I would say that practice really helps as well, where I can start to mm, let whatever is with me, whatever energies are there and anticipations that are there, to really kind of move and allow them to be there and also move through. And then, I've noticed that a lot of the stuff that I hold that feels very heavy is a lot of ego stuff too, right?
Mm.
It's ego around like, oh, you should have said this to this family member so that they could have felt better about this, or like you should have you didn't open up enough space and they don't feel comforted anymore. But so it's a lot of ego around what it should have been.
Mhm.
And when that happens and I can hear that voice, I'm like, oh, there, it does require me to recenter, meditate a bit, and be like, this isn't about you.
Yeah.
Like, this ain't about you. What, like, you can keep moving, it's okay. Like this, and like really have to recenter back onto who is dying. Like, who am I like being with? Who am I serving? Who am I and once I recenter into that, it actually feels so much calmer, right? It feels like we were kind of talking about like being a vessel and letting the spirit come through again. Like, and so the ego, once the ego can be recognized and be like, oh no, you're not important at this moment. The spirit can kind of come through again and be like,
Mm.
okay, we're back on track. Like,
Yeah.
how can we best serve? And everything that you've done up to this point is everything that you could have, right, already, so it's fine, let's keep moving. um yeah, those are the main practices, really. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, as someone who is a death doula and, embodying that identity, how do you honor the deaths and rebirths of the different parts of your life and chapters and endings?
Hmm. Yeah, I've started to create more ritual around endings and recognizing endings. um,
Mhm.
Whether it is like endings of relationships or endings of um, even conversations, right? After this conversation, there's going to be a death of our conversation, and how we can kind of practice what we want to keep and what we want to let go of after each ending, right? And
Mhm.
the gratitude we want to have and the learnings we want to have. And so, with everything that happens every day, and I'm still getting better around acknowledging endings. I think it's a practice for sure. But yeah, the two main questions I kind of ask is like, okay, now that we're sort of rounding out this conversation, like, what is it that I found really enlightening and really that I want to keep with me? and what do
Mhm.
I want to let go of, and kind of like allow, like, okay, that's ready to go. Um, and I think about that with like the people that we lose as well, like the people that die. It's like with every relationship, there's things you want to keep, like the inheritance that you want from them, whether it's their beautiful qualities of generosity or the love that they've showed you, or um, the peace that they've always exuded, right? And then there's the stuff that you might want to let go of in those relationships too, with the people that pass, and whatever pains, whatever sort of hard memories. Yeah, it happens with every ending. We can do that exercise of keeping and releasing.
Mhm. Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. It's kind of like a new moon ritual in a way.
Totally. I know. Do you have rituals around endings and beginnings?
Other than like similar to the ones that you mentioned, right? So being able to, first of all, just take time. I think it's so easy to just kind of be in that hustle and bustle, but then actually creating that sacred time and carving this out as a devotional practice of like, okay, I'm setting time to go inwards and reflect of how did this make me feel? What are the things that I really want to release? Except I start off with the releasing, not with like the things that I want to inherit from it. And then it's like, okay, what are the things that I actually want to call in? What do I want to create more space for? So it's almost like, what do I want to let go of in order to create this space for things that I desire to come through? And so just really being intentional and reminding myself of those things that I want until, the next cycle of that death appears. And so it's kind of nice to um, take time to honor that, take time to honor our desires and be intentional about the space, be intentional about the life that we want to live, whether it's through, different mini deaths in our own life or like the physical death that loved ones experience or we ourselves experience.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And even in like, especially, I think I found a lot of deaths around like what are the narratives or patterns in me that need to die, right?
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
big ones that are like, oh, you have been there for a long time. It's time for you to
Mhm.
die. It's like we've had a really lovely, hard, difficult relationship, and I'm ready to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Like one, being conscious enough to honor that and be like, okay, I'm ready to let that go. Like, what does that look like? What do I want to actually bring in? And to your point, it's just so interesting how death is a part of our life and like every single day.
Yeah.
If you think about even just taking a walk in nature, you can see it around you. And it's so interesting to see both sides, the polarities of just both, things being birthed and things passing on. And so it's such a sacred concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The seasons.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so when did you first start wanting to share about this work that you do? And like how did you even present it, right? To the world
Yeah.
even.
It's been a bit of a long journey through that with a lot of a lot of internal deaths, but lots
Yeah.
of good birthings. Um, yeah, I was certified at the end of 2020, so during
Mhm.
the pandemic, and it really took a year. Like I would like put it into conversations here and there, like, yeah, I got certified as a death doula and what it is and that, and like really just to test out how it affects people and what they want to say about it and whether there's an openness there. And yeah, that was like my year of just being really shy and chicken shit around like, talking about this work because I wasn't very confident in it. Well, after the certification, I was like, this is sacred, beautiful work, but is the world ready for it yet? That was really
Mm.
the main doubt that I had immediately. So yeah, that year was a lot of like putting it out there and see how people respond, and it was a big experiment. And then at the end of 2021, when my aunt was dying of cancer, my parents and I went to go be with her in her last month, and I went to go be her doula. And yeah, being able to practice it and not necessarily quote unquote know what I'm doing, but really kind of go into the spirit of being a doula for my aunt, it really just happened on its own. Like the way I would care for her, the way that I advocated for her voice, even though she was nonverbal at the time, really assisting my elders around being able to make decisions around her healthcare, all of those things. It came very naturally. And it came, yeah, it flowed. And so that was the point where I was like, oh, we're meant to do this. Like, got it.
Wow. It was like you got the validity in that
Yeah.
because, yeah. And so it's almost like I'm wondering, as you're in that role, do you feel as if it's something else like speaking through you, or even just saying the words to, it's like you talked about it, sometimes you say words about, what is happening or preparing the funeral. What is that spiritual experience like for you?
Yeah, it does feel like a flow. It feels like a flow that that it comes easily. Where people, people might have a very emotional question or thing that they have a problem with, and it will be charged emotionally, but when I'm talking to them, it doesn't feel charged to me. Like, it feels like, oh, I'm totally capable of being able to answer this question and help her problem solve, and not really like worry about the really charged emotional stuff. It's like a, yeah. I don't know how to explain it, Lisa. It is like something is moving through me that knows what to say next.
Yeah.
And I remember giving a talk at Burning Man about being a death doula, and my best friend and her husband afterwards, they were like, we've never seen you talk like that before,
Wow.
work, and like you just really your light was so big, and you really could really talk through things very easily. And I was like, I know, like, I don't know. Really, when I talk through things with people, especially around death, dying, and what they're feeling around it, it kind of just comes. It comes, and it doesn't feel like I'm trying to figure out what to say, It feels like, yeah, I'm the vehicle for what they need to hear, what they need to listen to. Yeah. I mean, do you feel that? How do you explain it?
Yeah. I mean, as I'm listening to you, it almost, what I'm noticing is just how inherent it is, how very natural, intuitive it is. I think when something feels like more in flow, it's almost like it's meant to be, or if you've done this many lifetimes before, right? Just so natural.
Yeah.
That effortlessness. And so I think that's really beautiful. And so as share more of your work in the world, how do people work with you? Are they able to work with you, not just only when they have a death in the family, but what are your current offerings to help people understand and work with this transformation?
Yeah. So, yeah, death doulas don't just work with people at bedside, at end of life necessarily. Um, a lot of people approach me when they're healthy. That's actually the time that I love working with people, because they're able to really state exactly what their wants and their desires and their needs are for their end of life experience. And not everyone thinks about it, right? Of course. and But now is a really perfect time to think about it so that you can have it down on paper. Because what happens a lot of times towards death and dying is people can't be present because they have to make a lot of really difficult decisions for their family member that might not be able to speak for themselves. And a lot of times they're guessing on what the best decisions are. And so if we write it all down, if we really have a guide to be able to work through a lot of the uncomfortable conversations, you can be prepared, right? Everyone can be prepared. What I've been noticing recently is a lot of people kind of in our age group, 30s, 40s, who have aging parents and are starting to worry about like, oh, what are my responsibilities, right, around caring for my parents? The roles are starting to reverse? What does that look like? And there's a lot of anxiety because there's a lot of unknowns. And there's some Asian parents that they set it up and they're like, here's a number, just call it when you're just call it, I've organized it all. But that conversation about how can I best take care of you? What is it around, like, how are you feeling about aging? What are the values that contribute to your quality of life? And how can I most support those values as you age? Like, a lot of those conversations, I think people are scared to have with their parents, but they know it's necessary. And I have a planning process, and I talk to people our age around how to best access that conversation. And we do it by like bite-sized pieces, right? We do it in a way that lets their parents feel safe in this conversation, because they a lot of times don't want to have this conversation, or even if they do, they feel really insecure about not having the words to. So it's really working with both sides around unearthing the love underneath this conversation, which is like, I care about you and I want you to age in a way that is respectful and honors you, and the parent really accepting that and being able to receive. So that is, other than an active dying relative that might need me at bedside and me to help family, I really enjoy working with children and elders, and the generational gap of how to best take care of our elders, and open up that conversation, because it's so important. It's so important, and no one really has it. And it can create a lot of strife later on, when that time could really be peaceful and meaningful and filled with a lot of love and presence.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Mhm.
And so what would you say is the biggest takeaway or insight or learning that you've experienced as you transitioned into this, to being a death doula?
Oh, girl. um, hmm. What comes to me is that we don't have to be afraid of death. That just like every life experience, there's so much richness to the death experience. And it's such a rich time for so much love to really come out. But we haven't really been taught how to do that, how to work through death and allow it and accept it to be there, for us to reap all of the richness and benefits from the experience. And a lot of that is because, you know, we're raised in such a saving culture. We need to fight illness, we need to save everyone. And we fight till the end, where if you're fighting to the end becomes so hurtful and painful.
Yeah.
And so how do we open up space around that so that that time can actually be a really rich and open and loving experience for everyone? And that might require some surrender, right? Surrender to reality, surrender to truth, surrender to the spirit that wants to be released. And yeah, I think that that's really fitting with like any work in life, your work, your healing work, right? It's like surrender to what wants to let go and wants to leave and wants to die and wants to, because there's a lot of wisdom in that experience when you are able to accept when something wants to go or someone wants to go. Yeah, don't be afraid of death.
So, as you know, someone who is so close to death, how do you honor the sanctity of your everyday life?
I recently, again, the practice of doing it every day, I think can be a difficult practice. But I've recently done a best 3 months like protocol with a death doula friend of mine.
Ooh.
You do like, you contemplate questions around your physical body, your emotional state, and your relationships, your mental space, and what kind of legacy you want to leave on this earth, your spiritual questions, and then like practical questions around what you want to do with your body afterwards, things like that. And you do that in the frame of mind of you only have 3 months left. And it's been so eye-opening and heart-opening for me to go through this, because once you kind of determine how you want your ending to be, what kind of vibe you want for it, who you want there, who you want to care for you and who you don't want, like really answering those questions, you start to really compare it to what your current situation is. And it's like, oh, how do I get closer to that? Right? I get closer to what I imagine is everything I want to do before I go. And so that protocol has really started to help me contemplate, am I living the way that I want to, as close to, like, with knowing that time can run out, right? Knowing that time. So some specifics around it is like, I have imagined my deathbed and it's in nature somewhere in a cabin, and the sun shining through my window, and there's a pot of soup always going on the stove, and friends and family can kind of wander in however they want, be with each other, but there's only like room for like 2 or 3 people in my room. Because I want it intimate, right? I want it close with whoever's there. I don't want like 12 people in my room. And then one thing was like, I want to be able to lead this death. And maybe I'm not verbal, but in what I'm envisioning, I'm still verbal. I can still like speak. And yeah, I don't want anyone that's caring for me to come in and like try to feed me, try to give me water, try to do this or change me. I want to be able to ask for it. I want to say, hey, I'm hungry, or hey, I'm not. I don't want anything more, and allow myself to go as I want to go. And that looks like rest. It looks like really intimate, beautiful conversations with people. It looks like maybe some reading, some meditating, looking out the window into nature, but it's calm and it's soft. And when I thought of that, I was like, oh, am I living my life according to how I want to drive things? Right. Like that
Yeah.
started, that's what made me realize around, am I living this life where I'm driving and I'm telling people how I want to move through it? And that was that's been shifting a lot in my reality now. And thanks to contemplation around death,
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful and so juicy. I'm like, I want to try that.
You can do it. I'm down to work with you on that. Let's paint your picture, girl.
Yes. And so that is one of her offerings too. If you
It's
want to work
true.
with Erika.
Contemplate, your best 3 months and see if it
That's
lines up with
beautiful.
how you're living now, and find ways to help those two things align.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I love that. Um, but before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would love to share before we share how people can get in touch with you?
Mm. Infinite gratitude to you.
Oh,
Yeah, for being a space, right? For being a space for us, for people that care about sharing heart space and sharing service through heart. I think that you offer such beautiful questions and curiosities, and I'm really proud of you. Yeah, I
oh,
really am. Like, I'm really touched by how much you've moved through since we've known each other.
yeah.
Moved through, moved forward, moved through again. Like, I know your path has been quite quite so many chapters to it, right? So many chapters of movements and stops and hurdles. And so it's really nice to see you and your face really bright in this space, in this chapter of your life and what you're doing. And and the way that you facilitated this conversation, and the way that you do when we had our session, like, it makes me very confident that you're doing spirit work. And it's so,
Oh,
yeah.
oh, it's so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. And where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you with all of your amazing offerings? I just love the work that you're doing, and I'm so glad that we had this time and this space to really share and just share at scale the impact that you do, not only in just a traditional setting, but there are so many different ways of honoring death in our life, and how to be intentional about what that looks like metaphorically, directly, and how to honor the time that we do have. So beautiful to have this conversation. So where can people find you?
I have a website, and it's erikalim.com, ErikaLim.com. I'm sure it'll be in like show notes or anything.
Yeah, it will.
And then I have a Substack where I do email newsletters and longer form content, which has been hitting people in a really nice way. So that's erikalim.substack.com. And then I'm also on Instagram, so you're welcome to contact me there, Erika V. Lim. But yeah, no, reach out, let's talk. I think people have a lot of curiosities around death and dying and what this work is, and people want to embrace it in a more curious and meaningful way. So I invite everyone to kind of just reach out however they feel called to, whether it's a small question or a moment of crisis, whatever it is. Yeah, it's really nice to talk to people.
Amazing. Thank you so much again, Erika. It was so wonderful to have you on here. And thank you, everyone, for tuning into this episode. And we're always happy if you leave a review. So if you loved this episode, please share the podcast, HeartStream Musings, with your community and your network. And I will leave all of Erika's information also in the show notes so you can get in touch with her. And if you want to learn more about what the process is of how to work with a death doula, she can certainly help you. And I hope this episode served you all. So thank you for tuning in, and I will catch you next time.
Thank you.